Your players walk into a dungeon. They fight some monsters, they win, they rest. They fight more monsters, they win again, they rest again, and nothing changes. The dungeon doesn't care that they are there, the villain doesn't react to their presence. The world sits there, waiting for them to decide what to do next.
It feels like a video game from 1995 where enemies respawn in the same spot every time you leave the room. Your world feels dead, static, like a theme park where the rides only start when the players show up.
But what if the dungeon fought back? What if the villain's ritual kept progressing whether the players stopped it or not? What if that infection they got from the zombie wasn't just hit point damage, but something worse that was slowly killing them?
Ciao! Welcome to Cantrip. My name is Simo.
And my name is Diego.
And today we are talking about two tools that can radically change how your game feels: hidden counters and timers. Because if your world doesn't track consequences and time, your players will never feel urgency. They will take long rests after every fight, deliberate for hours on every decision, and treat your campaign like a turn-based strategy game where nothing happens unless they make it happen.
Let's fix that! The DMG actually talks about this. It suggests using time pressure as a way to create urgency. So you, DM, don't just read that, nod, and then completely forget to actually do it. Because tracking time is work. Tracking consequences is work. It's easier to just let the players do whatever and react to them. But that makes your world feel fake. Because in a real world, things happen whether you're there or not. Rituals complete, diseases spread, prisoners get executed, armies march. And if none of that happens in your game, your players will never feel like their choices matter.
So let's talk about counters. A counter is just a number you track that changes based on player actions. Super simple but incredibly powerful. In my last campaign, a mysterious infection was spreading through the population. Every time the players fought an infected enemy and got hit, I rolled a special damage die in the open. The players could see the roll, but they didn't know what it meant. Behind the screen, I was tracking an infection counter for each character. Every hit added to that counter, and once it reached a threshold, they'd become infected too. And I watched the tension at the table skyrocket. They didn't know how it exactly worked. They didn't know the exact mechanics. They just knew that getting hit by an infected enemies was bad, really bad. They started playing more carefully. Positioning mattered. Avoiding hits mattered. The infection wasn't just flavor, it was a mechanical threat they could see but couldn't really understand. That's the power of a visible counter with hidden consequences.
Here's another example. In my next campaign, I'm tracking kills. Every enemy each player character kills gets added to a hidden counter. And at some point, maybe when they die, maybe in the afterlife, they'll face the souls of everyone they've killed. The players don't know this is happening. They're just playing the game, but I'm keeping score. And I know that when the reveal comes, it's going to hit hard.
The DMG mentions tracking things like organizational reputation, NPC attitudes and environmental changes. But you can track anything. How many times players have been spotted by guards? The city gets more paranoid. How much noise they've made in the dungeon? Wandering monster checks get more frequent. How many civilians they've saved versus ignored affects their reputation.
Counters don't have to be complicated, they just have to matter. Some counters should be visible, some should be hidden. Visible counters create tension because players can see the danger approaching. Hidden counters create paranoia because players know something is tracking them but don't know what. So use both.
Now let's talk about timers. A timer is even simpler than a counter. It's just this thing happens at this time, whether the players are ready or not. In Diego's campaigns, we ran into a mystery. A strange ritual had caused some deaths. The suspected culprit, a woman named Alinor, was in jail awaiting trial. And it was pretty clear she'd be convicted and executed without a fair defense. But we were in a hurry, we had another mission, so we left the side quest behind. We came back to the village a few days later, and guess what? Alinor's trial was happening that same day. We had hours to investigate and find evidence to save her, not days. Hours. If we'd come back even later, we would have found her grave. That's the power of hidden timers. The world moves even without you.
The DMG talks about this. Rituals that complete after a certain number of days, prisoners scheduled for execution, natural disasters on a countdown, armies marching toward the city, plagues spreading through regions. So don't read that and think, yeah, I'll do that when it's dramatically appropriate. No, do it all the time. Put timers on everything, even minor quests. There's a monster in the woods attacking travelers. Cool. If the players don't deal with it in 3 days, a merchant caravan gets wiped out. If they don't deal with it in a week, the village sends their own hunters and some of them die. If they don't deal with it in 2 weeks, the monster migrates somewhere else and the quest is gone.
Not every timer needs to be dramatic, but every timer reinforces the same message. This world is alive, it doesn't wait for you. And as for the counters, you can have visible timers and invisible timers. Visible timers create urgency. The ritual completes at midnight. You have 6 hours. The players know exactly how much time they have. The tension is in the countdown. Invisible timers create dread. The players know something is happening. They just don't know when.
You can also combine counters and timers. Let's say there's a plague spreading through a city. You put it on a timer. Every 3 days the plague spreads to a new district. But you also track a counter. How many infected people the players have helped versus ignored. That counter affects how fast the plague spreads and whether certain NPCs survive. The timer creates urgency. The counter tracks consequences.
Let's say the players are infiltrating a fortress. You start a noise counter. Every time they make noise, smashing a door, fighting loudly, setting off a trap, the counter goes up. And when the counter hits a threshold, reinforcements arrive. But you also put a timer on it. The villain is completing a ritual in the same fortress. In 3 hours it's done. Now the players are racing against time while also trying to stay quiet. 2 types of pressure at once. Track everything: time, noise, reputation, infection, kills, destruction, witnesses, failed attempts. Your players make choices, track the consequences.
Okay, so how do you actually implement this without going insane? We suggest to start small, that's it. Don't try to track 15 different things at once. Write it down. Seriously. Don't try to remember this in your head. Write it on a note card. Put it behind your DM screen. Update it as the session goes. Reveal some, hide others. Let players know some timers and counters exist, but keep others hidden. Reveal some part of it and hide others. You have 3 days before the ritual completes, but you don't know how close you are to being fully infected.
Make it matter. If you track something, it has to have consequences. Don't track noise if nothing happens when they are loud. Don't put things on a timer if the players can ignore the timer without consequences. And here's the most important part. Follow through. If the time runs out, the ritual completes. If the counter maxes out, they get infected. Don't fudge it because it's inconvenient. That's when it matters the most. The stakes are only real if the consequences are real.
So yeah, counters and timers. Track consequences. Track time. Make your world alive.
Your players will feel urgency, and your campaign will feel more alive.
Start simple. Pick 1 counter or 1 timer for your next session. Write it down. Follow through.
And let us know in the comments. Do you use counters or timers in your campaigns? What are you tracking? Have you ever had a timer run out and completely change the story?
And if you've got a brutal counter that your players don't know about yet, tell us. We love that stuff.
If this video helped, leave a like, subscribe, share it with other DMs who need to put some pressure on their players.
And until next time, keep rolling. Thanks
for watching.